Today on In Your Face Anatomy, we are talking about the eyeball. Here we go. Okay, the eyeball. So with the eyeball, of course, we use that for vision. We've already talked about the brain, where we know cranial nerve number 2 is going right towards vision. Now we're going to look at the actual structures of the eyeball itself. So what we want to know, first of all, is the eyeball has 3 different layers to it. It's got the outer coat, which is really a protective layer for us, the middle coat, which is a nutritive and vascular layer, and then the innermost coat is our photosensitive layer. So I want to start with the outer coat. There are 3 structures on the outer coat that we need to be familiar with. First up is the sclera. So the sclera is the white part of your eye. When you look at the eye, you see all the white. That is the sclera. So that's got to be this outside structure here. Then we also, in the outer coat, have the cornea. Cornea is the clear, transparent part of your eye that covers up the anterior portion, covers up the front of your eye. That is the cornea. So the cornea looks like a contact lens, but it works and acts like a windshield on a car. It's there to protect any dust or pollen or any debris from getting into the internal structures of your eye. The sclera, we said, is the white part, so it's got this smooth epithelia layer that kind of goes all the way around it, and that's just for muscle attachments. We've got lots of muscles that come in and attach to that. If you remember, cranial nerve 3, cranial nerve 4, and cranial nerve 6 all function to move the eye. That's where these muscles are coming in and they're attaching to the sclera. So we have the ability to move the eye in all the different directions that we want. And our eye muscles are actually our most used muscles in our body. We can move them, thousands of times a day, just depending on what we're doing, what we're looking at, what's going on. And then the third part of my outer coat is referred to as the limbus. The limbus is this little swelling part right here. It's also known as the corneal scleral junction, where my cornea and my sclera meet. Now, the purpose of the limbus is the cornea, because it works like acts like a contact lens, it cannot produce new cells. So when these cells wear out, we need someplace to get new cells from, and we get them from the limbus. So the limbus is like a little cache of stem cells. A cache stem cells that we can use to create new cells for the cornea. So they'll get produced here, and then they get pushed out onto the cornea and kind of migrate across and take up their position. So that's what's super important about the limbus, aka the corneoscleral junction. Next, we have the middle coat of the eye. So the middle coat also has 3 layers. First up is what is called the choroid. So the choroid is the vascular layer, just meaning it's got tons and tons of little blood vessels running through it. And we're going to see the choroid. I'm going to do it in red here since it's a vascular layer. Sorry for the shadow. And this is the best I could do. I don't have a light source on the other side. Boom. And it runs through all here. Oops. It butts right up against the sclera, and its job is to feed the sclera with some of those vessels. So it brings the nutrients and the oxygen to the external structures of the eye, or the outer coat layer. Now, an interesting thing about the choroid is right at the end here is it thickens. It gets quite a bit thicker here, and we refer to this section as the ciliary body. Out. That is my ciliary body. Now, my ciliary body gives rise to a bunch of little ligaments. Come out on both sides here. I'll come back to that in just a second. Let me get ciliary body down here as our second structure. Ciliary body. Good. And those ciliary ligaments that come out here, what they end up doing is coming around and they anchor to the lens. I'm not going to write that. The color's so light. So this is my lens. Now the last part of the middle coat is referred to as the iris. The iris, of course, is the colored part of your eye. But really what we want to know is a ring of muscle. A ring of muscle comes out and butt out, just something like that on both sides. And that is my iris. So this ring of muscle, it can constrict and make your pupil smaller, letting less light in, or it can dilate. Oh shit. There we go. Or it can dilate and make the pupil bigger so more light gets into the eyes, depending on our situation. So if we end up in low light or dim, dark situations, we can make that pupil bigger through the iris to allow more light in so we can make sense of what's going on in the world around us. So we've got the iris, we've got the ciliary body, we've got the choroid. That brings us to our inner coat. Our inner coat is our photosensitive layer here. And it has two layers to it. I've got a pigment layer. And this is going to be my innermost layer. And I've got my neural layer. And that is my outermost layer. And these two together, the pigment layer and the neural layer, make up the retina. So really that inner coat, that photosensitive area, is all about the retina. That's huge. Inner coat, retina. Retina has these two layers, the pigment layer and the neural layer. So we'll start with the pigment layer because that's the innermost layer. So I'm going to do it in a blue because my eyes are blue. Because it's a pigment layer, that tells us that we're releasing pigments. So we've got melanocytes in here, the same cells that give your hair its color and your skin its color. We have this pigment layer that's going to come right up along behind the iris there. Good. So pigment layer. And with our pigment layer, there's two main types of melanin that get released by these melanocytes. I could have either eumelanin, and that is for people with brown or hazel eyes. Brown or hazel. And that is roughly about 80% of the world's population has brown or hazel eyes. Our other way is pheomelanin, and that is for people with blue, gray, or even green eyes. And that's going to be about 8% of the world's population. And then the other 12% are the other color eyes, pink eyes for albino people and black eyes, red eyes. I don't know, some crazy people out there. Anyway, so these are the rays that get sent back. What I mean by that is, you know what? I'm going to come back to that in just a second. Let's talk about the neural layer first. So the neural layer, boom, runs right along. That's too close of the same color. Let's switch that up. This is still my neural layer. And it runs right along the inside of that pigment layer, but it doesn't go all the way around. It's going to stop about there. And this is really the photosensitive area. And what I mean by that is this is where we're going to find the main cells. We've got rods and we've got cones. Rods and cones. Excuse me. So with our rods, what we're looking at is scotopic vision. Rods are scotopic vision. And what that means is it allows us to see in the dark. So this is for dark vision. It also lets us see like black and white colors, black and white as you know what, lets us see black and white. Our cones, they allow us to see photopic vision. Photopic. I always think of photo. I see photo there, and I think the colored pictures is how I remember that, because it allows for colored vision. Color vision. It also allows for, pull that down a little bit, visual acuity, being able to see the little fine details that are going on in the internal layer, the rods and cones. All right, next up is the humor. So there's two types of humor in our cells here. Let's go with this. So in the posterior portion of our eye, so this is all the posterior portion, this is the anterior portion up here. So in the posterior portion, I have what is known as vitreous humor. And vitreous humor, mostly water and electrolytes, but it's a gel-like substance that is transparent, so light can still pass through it and get to that neural layer of the retina. And it almost looks like a breast implant is what I immediately think of when I hear vitreous humor. And we'll see that when we do the eye dissection. When we pour out the vitreous humor, it stays clumped together, and it really does look like a little breast implant. So vitreous humor, and one of its functions, besides being nutritive, is it helps push the retinal layers back and hold them in place just through pressure alone for it being there. Our second type of humor is called aqueous humor. Let me find a color I haven't used yet. Okay. So aqueous humor gets secreted by the epithelial cells on the ciliary bodies. So there's some epithelial cells, and they will release aqueous humor, which is also nutritive, and it will eventually make its way into the anterior chamber. So let me be clear on this. In the posterior chamber, I have aqueous humor and vitreous humor. In my anterior chamber of the eye, I only have aqueous humor, though. Now, an interesting thing about aqueous humor is it gets picked up right down here by this little lymphatic vessel. That's a terrible color for that. Let's try that again. It's a color we don't have up here. I don't want to do, we'll just do red. This is my little lymphatic vessel that is absorbing the aqueous humor. And this is known as Schlimm's canal. So Schlimm's canal, or the canal of Schlimm, you may hear it say that, drains the aqueous humor back out of the eye. Because we said the aqueous humor is nutritive, that means when it gets secreted out, we've got all of these nutrients that are feeding the internal structures of the eye. Then as it makes its way to the front, it gets reabsorbed through these lymphatic vessels, the Schlimm's canal, and it's sent off to the lymph system. So it creates almost like a current, we could say, where it gets secreted here and gets reabsorbed here. And so it allows that flow to continue. And we have to drain the aqueous humor every day, constantly, because it is nutritive. So it gets secreted, it gives up its nutrients, and now it's no good to us anymore. So we got to get it out so we can get some more aqueous humor in there. If drainage becomes an issue, then the intraocular pressure inside of my eye is going to start to build up. And that can lead to conditions like glaucoma, eye loss, blindness, anything along those lines. So that is the basic structure of the eye. What I want to make sure we understand here is that if this is light coming in, the only way light can get in is through this little narrow opening. This is my pupil. I should have drawn a pupil in there. So here is my pupil, the black spot in the center of your eye, pupil. And the pupil is really just a hole. It's also known as the iris aperture, which just means the hole in the iris, essentially, is what it is. So it's really a hole. So if we didn't have our cornea here, we could literally stick something into our eye because there's nothing blocking it until we get to that lens. So light comes in. Now the curve of our the curve of our cornea here is going to automatically direct light back towards that neural layer and the lens. when it hits the lens is going to redirect that light straight back towards that neural layer. But because of the shape of the lens, when it gets directed back that way, the image gets flipped upside down. So when we actually see the image in the back of our eye, it's upside down. Then probably the most important job of this neural layer is it takes that image and it changes it from light into an electrical energy that we can send to the brain via an electrical impulse, electrical signal, I should say, that we can then send to the brain through the optic nerve here, where we can then make sense of what's going on. The brain will, of course, flip it back up to right side out, so we can end up, never did label aqueous humor. Do that up here, aqueous humor. Good. So we can make sense of what we're seeing, and the world is right side up. All right, so in a nutshell, that is the eye. Practice, practice, practice. Good luck.